Okay, good morning and welcome to the very first session of very first live Q&A session of product management. I am Bryony, your teaching associate and moderator for the session. Today's presenter is Mangesh Dalvi, who is the AVP products at Myntra. The objective of today's session is to allow a free-flowing Q&A session where you can put forth your queries and pertaining to which Mangesh will address them within the given time constraints that we have. The session will be start with a 20-minute discussion, post which we will open up to take the live questions which we've received through the Google form before, as well as the questions coming in. If you have a question, you would need to put the same in the chat box at the right-hand corner of your screen. Kindly note in the chat while asking a question, please start with to Mangesh. This will help us differentiate between general chat and questions directed to Mangesh. Before handing it over to Mangesh, I would request you to kindly write your name in the chat box in order to mark your presence for this live session. Also, please note this session is best viewed at 450p and yeah. So handing it over to Mangesh.
Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. It's a pleasure being here, and a little weird when I can't really see everyone. But all the same, thank you so much for taking time out. I hope you guys are enjoying the course that upGrad has put forward for you. It's been a great experience for me to help the upGrad team and see how we can design the product management module. Hopefully, there are a lot of learnings for all of you as well. So thanks again, Bryony. And let me give you a quick introduction about myself. So I am currently handling products for a particular vertical at Myntra as the EVP product management. Prior to that, I was with Xiaomi, again looking at the product piece for their e-commerce venture, which is me.com, and the Android app. And before that, I was with ClearTrip. So I spent about 4 years with ClearTrip, handling multiple products, mostly all the transactional products at ClearTrip, which is the flights and the hotels and getaways and packages, etc. I graduated with an MBA before that, and I was doing my engineering degree. I did engineering, and I worked as a developer for about 5 odd years before that. Yeah, that's a quick introduction about me. And Bryony, please let me know if we can move forward.
Yeah, we can move on to the presentation.
Great.
Yeah, Mangesh.
Okay, thanks so much, Bryony. So guys, as you can see, so we have about 4 or 5 things that we thought we'll cover today. So the first was, again, this is a brief overview of what was covered in some of the sessions. So one is to basically understand the market as an upcoming PM in a company. A few things that typically end up happening is you need to, before getting down into any kind of product and detailing it out, first one of the first things that needs to happen is also to understand the macroeconomic situation around you and generally the market you're operating in. So we'll just do a quick overview of that. Post which we'll actually get into a question which has been coming up quite often, which is about product management in a B2B versus a B2C kind of an environment. Then just a quick brief or catch up about market sizing, which is again one of the things that happens fairly frequently for PMs, wherein any product that is getting launched needs to have the PM needs to have some sort of an understanding about the uptake even before it's launched, right? So for various reasons. So we can have a quick look at that. After that, we thought I can just walk you through some actual products that we kind of built at ClearTrip when I was at ClearTrip, and I was actually involved in building some of these. So I thought this may be a good introduction into product management in general, or like real life product management in that sense, right? Where you get to see how and what kind of products are built in the B2C environment, because that's where I have more experience in. And just take a look at some of these things that put down there. And finally, we'll open it up to Q&A. Right, so we can take any questions. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And if I don't have the answers, I'll certainly come back and try to help out with that. Sure. So the first one is so the overview, basically understanding the market that we have, right? So I think this was generally covered in as part of the course. So there are broadly two things that you may want to look at, and that typically product managers end up looking at. One is the industry in which you operate in, and how is this industry generally behaving, and what kind of what are users usually used to when it comes to understanding the or using a product that is part of this industry. So generally this involves understanding the environment, the kind of opportunities that exist, and the kind of macroeconomic or even economic factors that are influencing around the environment. uh, the Porter's five forces again is a very popular tool that is used by most companies and most product managers to basically assess the risks that are there to your product. Fundamentally, the buyer power or the seller power. That how in specific companies, for example, in B2C, the barrier to entry is not that heavy, as you may know. There are generally five forces, and the biggest one of them is the barrier to entry. In B2C, given that it's a much more easier field to get into, the barrier to entry may not be that high, but at the same time, the competition becomes really intense because of that, and that plays a role in deciding a lot of aspects on your product. So the number one being simplicity, for example, right? Like if everyone is coming out with an app, say to purchase a particular to say a fashion app, for example, then how can you, as a product manager, make sure that your app is actually the most usable in that sense? Yeah. So that rounds it up in terms of the five forces that we have. Competitor analysis comes in a little down the line, wherein when you're actually launching a product, you obviously also want to understand how others are doing it in the market and what is it that they are doing. It's obviously very important for PMs to have a pulse of the market, right? So that you're not caught unaware and you're not taken by surprise that someone has actually launched a feature which no one ever even thought about. And even if they have done that, even if anyone has done that, then at least you're aware of how it works and how these things work and what could be used by you. Actually, this is not necessarily only for your competitors, but even in general around the industry. So for example, if there is a new payment mode that comes out, I'll take a specific example. Say the unified payment, the UPI framework for India, right? The Unified Payments Corporation for India actually has opened up their APIs, and if they've opened up their APIs, now a lot of wallets and a lot of mobile payment companies are going to be using their APIs. So as someone who's part of the e-commerce industry, as a PM in the e-commerce industry, it would be useful. It is obviously very useful for you to keep track of that, to understand what is the best way that these APIs can be used. The same goes for even say things like GST, right, which was the talk of the town a couple of weeks back, and we know that government is going to be releasing a few APIs that everyone would need to use. So, as a product manager, it would be very important that you keep track of these aspects, right? Not only for your competitors, but also general happenings in the industry and around the environment. And finally, the last thing that comes when you want to understand the industry is the size of the market. This has, I think we'll cover this in a little more detail in the next couple of slides down the line. But a quick word on this is that before launching any product, it is critical for PMs to understand the uptake, or to at least have a ballpark view of what kind of uptake they can expect. And that's where market sizing comes into picture. And yeah, this next piece around this was the entire adoption life cycle. I think this is something which you've probably gone through, the chasm as well, which basically means that typically products when they're launched see an uptake. There will be some downtime after that, and then it could actually pick up, or it could actually go down the chasm and it may not be picked up as much. So the criticality of this is wherein PMs need to understand what stage their product is, and basis that kind of understand what is the next steps. You know that generally you have a roadmap for say 6 months, 3 to 6 months sometimes, and sometimes even 6 months to a couple of years down the line. So it's also important that you understand where your product is in this particular life cycle, so that you can take the right steps and prioritize accordingly as to what features should be going out live. So yeah, that's like a quick word about understanding the market. Can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So yeah, so this is a question that kind of keeps coming up relatively frequently about product management in B2B versus a B2C kind of an environment. So personally, I have more experience on the B2C side, but then I've also had opportunity to work for about a year in a B2B kind of a setup, in a B2B product management setup. So I'll share my 2 cents about this, right? So there are few. I think at the fundamental level, product management remains the same. The challenges that are associated with the job don't really change drastically between the two functions, between the two rev companies. But then there are some aspects that are certainly more accentuated in a B2B role versus a B2C role, or vice versa. So I've I think jotted down 6 or 7 such points, and we can go through that. So the first one is scale, right? So in a B2C environment, the products that you're trying to build generally need to be built for a huge scale, right? So they need to be built, for example, for 1 million users. This means that it it is not the same as building something for a few thousand users, which is the case in a B2B company. So, and I think both are challenging, both are equally challenging, and both have their own merits and demerits. But scale, what that actually does to you is that it also means that if you're building something for 1 million users, then you may not want to make it very complicated. And that's one of the points that I've kind of put down the line, that it's all about features versus simplicity, which means if you're building something for 1 million users, you would always want to keep it really simple, so that it does not have too much of cognitive overload, or doesn't require too much of thinking, etc. Right? It should be that simple to use, and hence the user experience should be a priority in some sense. But in the case of a B2B product, because you're using and building it for a few thousand users or a few tens of thousand users, in that case, the time that they spend on the product is much higher. The attention span is much more, versus a B2C product. B2C product, typically users will use it for some time, and then they'll come back to it maybe the next day or the next month or the next year. It depends on product to product, right? For example, if it's a taxi company, you will probably be booking it like multiple times a week. But if it's a online, say e-commerce kind of a play, then it'll be say a couple of times a month or more than that. If it's online travel, let's say air ticketing, it'll be probably a couple of times in 6 months or something of that sort. Whereas a B2B, the amount of time usage per day is much higher. So because of that, features actually matter more. So you'll actually end up, the product managers may end up putting many more features in a B2B product compared to a B2C product, where simplicity is much higher. So that's one of the points here. Secondly, the second point was the business model and monetization. So I think B2B products are fundamentally a place where monetization is not very critical, in the sense that users are paying for it. They've opted into it, and hence they will be paying for it because they actually want that feature and that functionality. B2C, on the other hand, it is not very easy to monetize, as I'm sure all of you know. A lot of companies are a lot of time of PMs actually goes in thinking how to monetize and how to actually make say a certain revenue per user, in that sense. And that's why the roadmap is also kind of dominated by those kind of aspects, right? That where can you save money on the cost side, and where can you earn money on the revenue side. That's number two. Then building a minimum viable product, right? So building an MVP. It is, I think, literally a rule of thumb that in B2C, every product gets built out as an MVP, because you have only limited resources and you don't want to over invest in something which may actually not work out. In B2B, on the other hand, it is probably very difficult to build an MVP in some sense, because you've got direct customer feedback. You are actually talking to customers day in and day out. You or your sales team is actually talking to customers day in and day out, and they're getting these requirements directly from them. So it is obviously very difficult to build a minimum viable product in some sense. But I think the whole idea is that a feature set is gets built, that is now common to a large set of users. So if there is very specific things that one person needs, then it's kind of difficult to fit that in unless there is a huge revenue upside. And that's where the next point comes in about feasibility of building a product using data. So in the case of B2B, since there is a sales team, or even the product managers knows the customers directly, because there are a few thousand or few hundred customers, and typically PMs or sales teams will meet them day in and day out. They understand I think the PMs will obviously have that understanding real time or directly from the horse's mouth, or from the users who are using the product. In the case of a B2C product, it is a little tricky. While there are surveys and there are outbound calling that does happen, but the larger chunk of it actually comes in from data itself. So it is very important to kind of analyze data. It could be either via using say Google Analytics or any other kind of tools that you have for your app data mining, wherein you are able to figure out certain trends as to what's working and what's not working, and then basis that build a minimum viable product, or build the roadmap out, right? That you know that a lot of people are using a particular feature, then how is it that you can actually make it even better, or how can you make it even faster, or even more simpler? And that's where you actually look at data and not so much rely on actually talking to customers. While that is still followed, but then you'll be talking to a few hundred customers, whereas a few million are using it, so the percentage is really negligible, right? So which is why data plays a very important role. This the second last point was buyer versus user, which basically means that in the case of B2C, um, like you're typically using the product yourself. So, for example, say if you're in for example in the place that I am working at either ClearTrip or Mintra, I would also be a user myself. So it is a little easier for me to kind of relate to the pain points of users and customers and understand what is it that we should be changing. In B2B, it's a little more trickier because you're probably not using it on a day-to-day basis, the product itself, right? Secondly, even the person who's buying the product is not using it. So generally, the ones who buy the product are the ones who are signing the check, and they are say slightly higher up in the hierarchy in the company, whereas the users may be slightly lower down, right? So because of that, you the buyer and the user are actually different in this case. So that makes a difference as well from a PM standpoint. And I think the last point I had was a more technical aspect in some sense, right? That product managers in B2C have far more engineering sprints or release cycles, generally say 3 week sprints or 2 week sprints, compared to B2B, wherein the sprints are much longer, right? For valid reasons, because the changes that go in are have to be really well detailed out, and a lot of changes actually go in together as well. So that's how. That's I think these are some of the points that capture the differences between B2B and B2C environment. But in a nutshell, while there are a lot of differences, similarities are also equally as many in the two roles. And I think we can get into this in the Q&A if you have specific questions as well on this. Yeah. Yeah, moving on to market sizing, I think this has been covered in fair amount of detail in the sessions that you have. But I think I'll just kind of run through it again, right? So fundamentally, one example that comes to mind is say if so, the whole idea with market sizing. Take a step back is as a product manager, you're basically trying to build out say a particular product or a particular feature, and it becomes critical for you to assess what will be the uptake of this, right? Now, why is that important? For multiple reasons, right? One is that you need to, even before you detail out as to how something will work, it is important to kind of understand the business impact of a particular product, because you are actually sacrificing, or you're actually putting in your time as well as your engineering team's time on something versus something else. So if the option is, say, if you have the option of doing building a product A versus doing something for product B, then why would you actually spend time building out something unless you have a solid justification for it? And that solid justification starts off with the market size, right? That what kind of an opportunity are you looking at? The way to do that is actually covered in the slide or in the courses, which is you first find out what is the total addressable market, then you look at what is actually serviceable, and basis that you then take it to the next step, which is the final market size that you have. So one of the examples that I spoke about on this was, say you if you're again an online travel company and you're trying to build a product for a weekend, as say for to help users book hotels on weekends, right? So say on for weekend travel, so which is typically traveling out from a bigger city into say a nearby destination, and to figure out what kind of uptake will that have. So the total addressable market in this case would generally be, say, the number of room nights that are sold on an annual basis, right? Or it's either peer-to-peer accommodations, or it could be rental accommodations that are sold on an annual basis. That happens, right? So that is your total market size that you have. Now, when you want to reduce it a little more to the serviceable market, so you want to narrow it down, right? So in that case, you basically, the PM will need to think about what areas or what geographies are you first looking to service. Now, for example, maybe it makes a lot of sense for the PM in this specific scenario to look at opportunities that say weekend travel opportunities out of major metros. So let's identify. So they would then narrow it down to say three or four metros, like say Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, and a few more. And then once you look at these metros, then you basically identify the resorts or the room nights that are sold within a particular geography around these metros. So say like a 200-kilometer driving distance, and that you narrow it down to even further, right? So this is the number of room nights that are getting sold in this geography. And finally, when you come to the actual market size, you will the target market, that is the market that is within this geography, say resorts who have actually tied up with your platform and who have an ability to pay online, or they at least have some sort of an API that they've tied up with you, and now you can push updates to them. So that becomes again the further segregation of the target market. So it's basically you start narrowing it down from the target market to the serviceable market, and finally the actual target or your market size that you're looking at. So that is fundamentally one example, and the reason this is important is actually a little more critical. So say as a PM, you have identified that this is my market size and this is the revenue opportunity that we have. Now, basis that you can actually trade off against other priorities on your roadmap. So you know that you know what, this is going to give me so much upside, then I would rather do this versus doing something else. The other place where it helps is that this will also help your engineering teams know what is the amount of traffic that they can expect once this particular product goes live. Now, why is that critical? Because basis that they will need to then decide, say, how many servers to put in. For example, right? That okay, if you want to commission a bunch of servers, and what kind of say DevOps, what does DevOps need to do? What is it that the engineers need to do? How much resource allocation should they need to provide? To the other teams and so on and so forth, right? Like what is the kind of investment that is going to go in? So market size generally helps for a lot of these factors. It is one of the most hygiene things that needs to be done before you come up with any kind of product idea. So yeah, so that was to talk about the size of the market. Yeah, the next. So here I've just put a compilation of some examples of what product managers in a B2C kind of an environment and specific to ClearTrip, where I was working at, would be doing, and what kind of opportunities would they be kind of rolling out, right? And what kind of products would they be rolling out to their users? So I've listed out a few examples here, and then I've also given some screenshots to just given to help you get a perspective of how this looks like, right? Though some of these you may probably already have used as well. So Fair Alerts is one. Fair Alerts was basically it's a product, for example, where you know that a lot of users are coming into your on your platform and they are trying to book a ticket, but there is a large chunk that actually comes to the platform every day and just keeps checking for the same price and for the same flight and doesn't book it. And I'm sure some of you may have done this already, right? That you check the flight price today, then you know what you find. Oh, it's probably too high. Let me come and see it tomorrow. You come back again tomorrow. You again check the price, and you do that again and again. So this is a product that we built out to basically avoid that kind of a scenario and actually just alert the user that you know what, today this is the say the price is 3,000 rupees today. Tomorrow you alert him saying that okay, today's 3,100, it went up by 100 rupees, and what is the expected price tomorrow, and so on and so forth. So this is like a recommendation engine, or it's some sort of an intelligent engine that basically deciphers what the price is expected to be tomorrow if you don't book it today, right? So that's what alerting the users. Saved searches on the other hand basically would simplify travel research. So many a times you would actually go to a platform and search for something. It's not only on ClearTrip, you'll find it on a lot of other sites, but then they show you what you searched previously and what is the price of that now, right? So it just makes the customer's life much more easier because you don't need to type in the same things again and again, and it's already there for you ready. While at the face of it, of course, some of these sound very straightforward. The fact is that when you, as a PM, start detailing out, you need to consider a lot of other corner cases and aspects and flows as to how these should work. Search and book flow was revamped. So there comes a point when you see that that you're not getting a lot of traction on, say, either in booking or in searches, and there is something fundamentally different that you need to do. And that's where we ended up revamping the entire searching and booking experience on ClearTrip to make it much more chic and much more in tune with the times, right, and modern in some sense. Weekend Getaways, of course, as I spoke earlier, was a product aimed towards is a product that we built out aiming towards very specifically towards weekend travel. So from Bangalore, if you want to go to Mysore and you probably want to do that, you decide on that like on Thursday or Wednesday morning, then what are the best opportunities we can show you? On one hand, that is the example. The other example, I am just say in Bombay and I want to go somewhere. on a weekend, and I don't know all the options. I typically know only one or two options, like say Lonavala or Pune or whatever, but I don't know all the options. So this would help in that discoverability. So we thought we'll solve the discoverability problem and show the user that, you know what, there are 50 places that you can go to around Bombay and not only two. And these are all the 50 say hotels in the 50 places that you can actually go to. Speed is a very, very important factor in any kind of a B2C environment, because your users don't have the patience, right? They will typically wait for a second or two and then just probably close the website, or kill your app or whatever it is, right? So speed becomes a very important feature as well, and there's a lot of work that we did around it. And hotels ranking is another example I've given in, which basically means that what kind of like if I have say 600 hotels in Goa, then how should I rank these hotels? Like how can I make your life easier, and how can the ranking basically help you buy the right hotel for you, right? So this is about that. I think after this I've pasted some screenshots of blog posts on ClearTrip, which you can obviously go and read. This is all public information, so you can read it on their platform. And yeah, we can just stream through this, Bryony. So this is one example of a feature that was built out. Another feature was flight changes, wherein if users have bought a particular flight, and say I bought in I purchased a 11 o'clock in the morning flight, and then because of a meeting in the morning, I have to now delay it to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's a very simple use case, but there was no way it was done online earlier, and we built out a product that would cover the entire gamut of the life cycle for a user, wherein he can actually book a ticket, then come back and modify the ticket as well. And this is about online flight changes. So a lot of details have been captured in the blog post on ClearTrip. It's a fantastic resource if you would like to read it. So please do that. So then flight search. This is where I told about like actually we wanted to revamp search and make it really fast, as well as given a lot of quality results. And that's what we did, right? Like in the flight view itself, you can now identify if you need to switch airports, or if it's a red eye flight and you'll be flying it late night, or if it's a connection that is a very fast connection, for example. So say you're going from Bombay to London, and it has a layover at Dubai, and but the layover is only 45 minutes. So do you really want to book that? And it's something that we show upfront, so that the user doesn't need to go through downstream and then figure out, oh, what I bought is having a 45-minute layover, and now I need to rush from one terminal to the other. So we would actually show up all this information earlier upfront itself. So this is the kind of data that is basically designed here. Yeah, this is just a slightly better view of that. Say a long layover as well, right? That sometimes a particular flight has a really long layover, say 10 hours, 12 hours, and you're just sitting at the airport. So it's important to kind of highlight that. We thought, that a lot of users come back or they cancel their tickets because what they realized while booking, that they rather they didn't realize that it was like a huge layover, a really long layover, and they canceled. So we thought, why not make it easier for the users and just show this data upfront. Similarly, there is a lot of other aspects as well, like say taxes and fees that we are now showing to the users, and the airline refund policy. A lot of times, people would actually go downstream. They would book the ticket, and they would still not be sure as to what is the refund policy. Is it refundable? If it's refundable, what amount are they going to get? So, in product management, the whole idea is that you want to see this data that you say you get from either your customer service teams, or from your operations teams, or from your logistics teams, or whoever, and basically think through that how can the product or how can technology solve this problem, right? That is the fundamental idea of showing some of these screenshots, that what, we got this data and we said, why not just solve it upfront, show it right here, so that the users have this information at their fingertips, and now he can make a much more informed choice. Similarly, like the date said, that which is the date on which the flight is cheapest. If you're looking to fly on the 7th, but then you want to fly on the 9th, for example, you will save some money. So this is also information that we saw that people were checking for, say, flights on 7th. They were also checking on the 8th, also on the 6th, also on the 9th. So they are basically, sometimes when you're open to traveling on multiple dates, then you may you're just doing the search again and again. And we thought, why not make it simpler for the users if it's technically possible, and show this data upfront, so that users don't need to come back and research, right? So this is that example. Sometimes I think this was again a use case. We found that many people, so people know that they want to go to Germany, for example, but they don't really know the name of the airport, right? So why not make that simpler as well? And this is a case we got when we saw people are searching for some airports, like they were entering, say, a search string like Germany, and there were no results coming out. Now that's generally bad product management also, right? It's the PM's fault that he hasn't really seen data to figure out that, oh, there's so many searches that are coming in for, say, Maldives, but Maldives is not necessarily the airport. There's something else which is the airport. So it would be the PM's responsibility to figure out how can this be solved. right? That I know that there's a problem, and I probably also know the solution. So let's kind of get down to it and actually fix it for the user. So now it makes life so much simpler, right? So they don't need to uh, worry about the actual name of the airport. You just show the airports, and then the user actually knows which one he wants to go to, because it's also ranked in that sense. So we decided to rank it as well that way. Yeah. And yeah, this is again a lot of times there are so many flights. Like, if you just want to go from India to the US, you'll find that generally there is anything more than 300 to 400 flights. So we had a recommendation engine. We had like non-stop flights, and help the user make a choice, a better choice. So yeah, so these are some of the examples. Sorry if I stretched over. Uh, and I think I'm done with the presentation that I had. Over
Okay.
to you, Bryony. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we are open for Q&A, and as mentioned earlier, if you have any question, you would need to type the same in the right-hand corner of the chat box. You will need to start the question with to Mangesh. This will help us differentiate between general chat questions and questions directed to Mangesh. Yeah, so I'll just hand it over to Mangesh. We will first be taking questions which we received through the Google form, and then the ones that came in through chat.
Okay. Can I go ahead, Bryony?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So the first question I've got is from Satya. And the question is, what does a product manager bring to the table when one is trying to just compete with the competitor in bringing something along, something in the lines of what the competitor has? Is there a value add for product managers in such scenarios? Um, I think that's I would say, okay, let me think through this, right? So typically, it doesn't really happen like that in the real world, wherein a particular PM is just trying to ape whatever someone else has done. While from the outset, it may feel that, okay, that, say for example, X is the market leader in this field, and they've done something, and now Y is just trying to copy them. In a real life scenario, it probably doesn't happen that straightforward, right? So, for example, I still feel that, in fact, in such scenarios, there's a lot of value add that product managers can bring to the table, apart from just trying to ape whatever someone else has done. And I think there's a lot of use cases out there, right? Like, even if I talk of my experience in ClearTrip, and if you look at the leader at that point in time, which is Make My Trip, a lot of the features that say one built would probably at some point in time you would see it on the other's platform, but it was not like someone is trying to ape the other, either of the companies, right? Everyone has an independent roadmap. The value add that the product manager brings in such cases is basically to have a crisp roadmap wherein everyone in the company is aligned that this is the charter that we want to follow, and this is the roadmap that we are going to be doing, or this is the work that we are going to be doing over the next 6 to 8 months, and there could be changes to it. So obviously, a lot of the roadmap is with 80% confidence, but there could be changes, and changes happen due to multiple things. One of the things that you've mentioned is that, right, which when someone has, say, you see that competition has put out something which is a game changer, for example, and you know what? Okay, it probably is going to just it is a must have in some sense, but if it is that must have, then you would have certainly thought of it. Right, so a lot of so I think in the real world it probably doesn't happen like that. It does happen to an extent where, say for example, there is a compliance related requirement. So government has come out with new regulations, and everyone needs to comply with it. In that scenario, yes, there is something that A has done, and B would obviously need to follow at some point in time. They would also need to build around it. But the way it is done and the approach could be completely different, and that really depends on PM to PM. So I would say that there is a lot of value add that PMs can add as well, and it has to be certainly more than just copying what someone else has done. Uh, yeah. So the next question I have is around crossing the chasm. How do you handle the situation where early adopters fail to influence the early majority? This is really tricky. In fact, early adopters and early majority, I think it's one of the toughest chasm. It's probably the toughest part of the chasm to cross in general. there are a few things that we can do or that typically happens right in the real world, and I'll give you a live example of what of one example that I had. So for example, like the thing I spoke about, say getaways, right, as a product. Now there was a certain amount of market size that we had estimated and that I had estimated. I know that okay, that this is how I would say like to go about this particular product and say build it out and say for example, I would know that okay, that I'm expecting so much traction, I'm expecting so many users, and I'm expecting so much conversion, and this is the end number of room nights that I'm expecting on this product. And certainly that happens to the early adopters, right? I get the early adoption as well as what I've planned. But if the early majority is not coming in, then it is, I think, good point for the PM and the entire team, not only the PM, but actually rally along with the entire team to kind of reflect back and figure out as to what is probably going wrong. So one example in this is sometimes, say the early adopters are also people who are much more technically fluent, right, in using something, and they are actually much more adept at using something. So even if it's a complicated, say, flow that you've designed for something, the early adopters are typically okay with it, right, because they're generally geeks, for example, right. So they'll be cool with trying out whatever new that you have designed. But the general audience may not really be that kind to you, right? They might want it much more simpler. So some things that you can do in such cases is to actually figure out from data that where is it that in your entire in the product that you've designed, where is it that you can actually add value and probably simplify things or take off features. Sometimes taking off features is equally important as adding features is. So you can actually, what can you take off to make sure that a lot more people are actually now using your product. And a lot of this comes in via A/B testing. So there is no one clear answer to this, but generally A/B testing helps a lot in getting traction, right? So you know the traction of one audience versus the control group versus your testing group, and basis that product managers can then take decisions as to how to actually move forward and cross the chasm in some sense. Um, yeah, then I'll move on to the next question. This is from Manish. It says, can you give a brief explanation on how market sizing would be done for companies like Coursera, edX, Byju's, etc.? Uh, okay, so thanks for the question, Manish. It's a very tough one, I think, right? So I think market sizing for companies that I personally don't have much insight into how or say what is the business model that some of these companies have. Yeah, I've certainly seen Coursera and Coursera at least for sure. But if you're looking at market size for say your so there are two ways to approach this, right? And this is probably applies to not only this example but to anyone in any company in general, right? So one is when you are actually part of. So there is a top up approach and the bottom up approach, which I'm sure you've probably gone through. In some cases, it's probably more beneficial to actually use a bottom up approach, which means that you look at, say, now let's take Coursera for example. Say they already have X number of courses that are out there in the market, right? And now they're designing a new course, for example, let's say. And the whole idea becomes then, you know what, I have this data wherein I've seen that these X number of courses that I have, which are very relevant, have so much of traction. Basis that you can actually easily infer as to what is the market size that you can expect when you're launching something related to that in the same field, right? A new course, for example. On the other hand, if you did not have that example, or if you don't have the data, say you're now an outsider and looking at it, you would probably have competitive information. That what is the kind of, say for example, you go to SimilarWeb, or you go to say one of these sites which actually gives you the number of visits that these platforms get. So you can start off with that as your starting point. You know that okay, that this particular platform gets X million views or X million hits in a month. Basis that you know that okay, if you're designing a course, what is the amount of this is your target market, then you know that okay, that what is your serviceable is probably the links that each of these individual platforms are getting or individual courses are getting, basis which you can then decide that if a new market, that if a product they're launching, then what is the expected size or expected say registration that I can expect to get. That's another example. A third way would be to take a even bigger macroeconomic view, and you know that you know what. Say if I'm launching a new course on I don't know art, say something to do with the fine arts, then you know that okay, generally what is the number of registrations or seats that are there in this particular course in the offline world, and then kind of use that as a point to extrapolate what would happen in the online world. So there are a bunch of ways of doing it. There is no one right way, according to me, by which this happens, and a lot of this is trial and error. So you will have some assumptions, and basis these assumptions, you actually arrive at what is a realistic estimate for the market size for the for this particular industry. The next question I'll move on is from Anjani Kumar. And the question is, how does understanding a competitor's background help us as a product manager? Uh, so I think understanding competitive background. So when I'm assuming that when you ask that, you're actually asking about how does understanding a competitor help you as a PM. I think so. You know what? I have like slightly different view on it. I feel that it may probably not always help you. It could also hurt you if you're actually overly obsessing about your competitor, right? I think at least one thing that I have learned in my experience as a PM is it is always more important to kind of delve into what the customer wants more than what a competitor is doing. But at the same time, it is critical as PMs to kind of understand what is going on in the industry, right? So as long as you have that view and that lens, that you know what, yeah, that you're aware of what's happening in the industry. For example, if someone is launching, say, a new product or a new payment option, which you never even knew about, now that's a problem, because then no, as a PM, if you were not really aware of what is happening in the market, and someone has launched a really new, say, like when COD came out, for example, right, when cash on delivery came out, it actually would have taken up a lot of other people by surprise, because this was a new thing that say that Flipkart launched, and things like that, right? So it is obviously critical for other PMs to kind of know that, oh, something like this, like game changers are there, but then game changers are very far and few in between. Most hygiene business as usual product management and ends up being where you have an idea as to what some products, some other your competitors are doing, because it just helps you shape your roadmap in a way, and it also helps you prepare for something. But the more important thing is that you know what your competitor, what your customers want, and that comes in through multiple options, either through word of mouth, or through social media, or through data, or through, so, your outbound calling, through customer service, etc., etc., right? So I think it's just understanding customers is probably much more better than understanding competitors background. But at the same time, yeah, you may want to keep an eye out and understand what's going on in the market in general. And when I say competitor, it's not only in India, it's actually even across the world, right? That you may want to see that what are other industry, what are other companies in your area doing across the world, how are they innovating, what new things are they trying out. And yeah, why not? I think it's always good to have that knowledge, and everyone learns from each other, right? So that's the whole point around this. um, so the next question is from Shruti Narayan, and the question is, what are your go-to places, either a web or a book or blog, to do competitor analysis in case of e-commerce? Uh, no book that I can think of. Blogs, yes. Generally, every company has blogs. Like I actually ran you through the ClearTrip blog, right? For example, in fact, I think very few companies out there have good blogs, and I think that's what, according to me, one of the best resources to go through. So I would actually recommend that, for example, in travel, you should certainly look at, say, if you're do read up the ClearTrips blog. I think it's a wonderful resource. Airbnb has a fantastic blog as well, called the Nerds blog, and they detail out a lot of the aspects that they are actually pushing out, and what kind of changes are they doing, and they're very transparent as well. So a lot of companies have these kind of blogs wherein they are very transparent about the products that they're building, and how they have gone through the whole cycle of building that product, and what options went in, what they did, what they did not do. It's just very helpful to basically understand, and to learn from someone else's experience as well, right? That what worked and what didn't work. So I think probably the go-to places for me are mostly blogs, and of course a lot of other technical websites where they're with a lot of these details are pushed out. Product Hunt is again a very common platform that a lot of PMs refer to, because it details out a lot of new products that are coming out as well. Uh, okay, the next question is from Mudit Agarwal, and the question is a little more put into Myntra. It says, "Can you explain how Myntra approaches custom competitor analysis?" I'm not sure if I have the best answer here. I have not really been around at Myntra for that too long, but again, like I said earlier, right? I think competitor analysis is probably a relatively smaller issue for, at least for me as a PM. The more important thing is how do we approach customers, right? And I think that is something that we take, I think, very, very seriously. Um, from different touch points that we have, right? It could be via customer service, it could be via like outbound calling, it could be via market research, it could be via the app and the feedback on the app, or the feedback on Google Play Store, to kind of get that information and get that insight, and to build a product basis that, right? So a lot of it actually helps product managers in prioritizing the roadmap. That, if I know that if there is so much of a demand for a particular thing, or if something that we pushed out and we changed it, and there's a lot of backlash about it, then how do we kind of address that, and how do we take it forward, right? I think from a competitor analysis standpoint, it is not that big of a worry, because everyone has their own. I think you need to look at what kind of space are you playing in. So Mintra plays in a particular space, which is, say, mass premium fashion. some of the other competitors play in a different space, right? It could be either mass fashion or it could be a really highly premium fashion. So a lot of things that may apply to them don't necessarily apply to us, and vice versa. So it's not something that we kind of would go too much into, apart from having a hygiene understanding of what someone is doing. Uh, okay, the next question comes from Praful, and it is so Mitra has so many categories, and how is the market sizing done while adding or removing a new category? Uh, so this is a little tricky, right? I think new categories. So Mintra has started actually, and we are, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the company, but I think in general, let me address a general, this is a generic question, right? That how is market sizing done for a new category? So new categories that come in, obviously there is very less data that we would have in general, that anyone would have in general, PMs as well, right? But you look at markets, you look at other companies who are into it, and you basically basis that you can infer that, okay, that if I'm getting X traffic today on my platform, then let's say that if market, how is marketing going to play out, right? So first we look at the high level picture, that if marketing is going to be on it and they're going to be say for example going gung-ho on digital and on traditional media or radio TV, then what kind of footfalls can we expect? So if the traffic is going to go up from X to 1.5x, then we'll assume that this the delta was because of this new category that is launched. And then if this new category is going to come to my is going to come on the site, then what is the discounts that I'm offering, or what is the USP that I'm offering on my platform versus someone who's already offering the category? And basis that, we basically would be able to arrive at a market size. So for any new category, it is the same as launching a new vertical fundamentally, right? So say if I'm in fact, I'll take the example of again of ClearTrip, wherein say if we're launching a holidays portal, or say a holidays, yeah, like a weekend getaway kind of a platform, then you already know that, okay, that X number of people are booking hotels on my platform. Out of this X number of people, now I can expect, say, I know that 60% of this X books, or 6.6x books it for business days. That's from Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday. But 30% or 40% books it for a weekend, right? 30 to 40% is booking for Friday, Saturday, Sunday staying. Now, basis that, I know that, okay, this is my total addressable market. Then I will actually look at see how much of it is booked out of metros for nearby travel. And basis that, again, so I know someone's address, I know the user's address, probably I know his IP address, I know which city he's in, I will know that the city is booking, and basis that, I will be able to arrive at the approximate market size for that new category that I want to launch, right? So basis that, you will be able to apply the same principle for any kind of a vertical. The next question is from Dominic, and the question is, what kind of analytics do you use to understand customers' behavior? Is there a way to understand how a customer's behavior changes based on mood? So I can answer the first part. I think what kind of analytics generally varies from company to company. The most common resource out there is Google Analytics. I think pretty much every PM who's worked in a B2C kind of an environment would have at some point or the other spent a lot of time on GA, on setting up GA, on analyzing data out of GA. And then now there are also a lot of other tools that come into picture, wherein you can actually say have crash analytics, or your specific analytics to your mobile app, wherein you're getting a lot of data and session data, clickstream data to understand funnels. So the way to understand, I don't know if there is a way to understand on his or her mode, but the way we do it typically is you look at funnels, right? And the funnels are either the mega funnels at a higher level, or the micro funnels, which are much smaller. Say you want to just see users who added something to cart but did not check out. So that is one sort of a funnel that you can actually create, and GA helps do that. There are also a lot of other paid tools, by the way, that help. GA's Google Analytics is a free tool. It also has a paid version, but there are a lot of other paid versions as well, paid other tools as well that are used in the industry. I'm sure if you just click Google it, you'll know a lot of tools that are out there in the market, right? ClickWell is one example, for example. Okay. The next question is from Tushar Soni, and this is, how different is mobile and web product management, and what are some of the things to take care of? So I think it is actually now culminating into product management in general, where PMs are looking across the board on mobiles and sites as well as the website and mobile site also. But I think the fundamental difference is basically that is the real estate that you have to play, right? So generally, say on a website, you have a lot more room to play with. So PMs will know. For example, if I'll just take the example of say again of your trip, right, that we had. So if you do a flight search on the mobile app versus if you do a flight search on the website, you'll find that a lot more features are available and options are available to you on the desktop side. But on the app, this becomes much lesser, just given the real estate that you have. So you may want to actually keep only what is absolutely relevant, and design the user experience in tune with your designers and the UX team to figure out what is the best use of this real estate that you can offer. So becomes one of the key points in when you look at the difference between the website and the mobile app or the mobile on the mobile platform. And then secondly, of course, is drop off, right? So in the sessions, so typically earlier at least, mobiles or the app was more of a platform for discovery, and the actual transaction would happen on the desktop side. Now that has over time changed. A lot of people are now much more comfortable and buying on the mobile as well, right? So clearly the share of the mobile app has gone up in the recent times. So I think that's why the two of these are merging in some sense. But the biggest difference is just the real estate that you need to take care of, and basis that decide what features are absolutely critical to go live on app, as well as what features make sense on an app more than they make sense on the desktop much more. So things like that, right? So this helps in prioritizing in general. Because it may take time to actually build a feature across all platforms. Sometimes if the code bases are really different, so I think the product manager basically would need to take that call as to which platform should go out first on. Okay. The next question I have is from Prashant, and the question is, how does product management vary? For example, for a company that is selling devices and a regular software product. Okay, so I think let me rephrase this. I think it's probably to do with if I was say a PM at Xiaomi, which is basically a company that is selling hardware devices, versus selling software in a more of a software scenario like in Mitra or in Clearclip. So again, my personal experience there was also in the software side, just FYI, on the e-commerce side of things. But in general, product management for devices versus for a regular product is also fundamentally different, because then I mean, I think the product that you're looking at, say for example a mobile phone, right? If you're looking at the hardware of the phone, would mean that you are actually someone who has to be fluent in understanding the different kind of devices out there, and what works, what doesn't work, what sells, what doesn't sell, what is the cost or the BOM cost or the bill of materials cost. Why would certain say cameras be okay? Why would you be okay using certain processors and not certain other processors in the phone, in your phone, etc., etc., right? Secondly, the legal aspects around this as well, because you're selling a physical hardware device. It has to have certain regulations within. There has to be BIS approvals. There have to be other approvals that come in. So PMs on hardware selling or in a company selling devices would obviously need to be cognizant of all those aspects. PMs who are on the software side of things would need to be aware of very different kind of aspects, which is basically the traffic that is coming onto your platform. How is this traffic funneling down to making a payment, to purchasing a product? After they purchase the hardware product, how is this actually getting shipped out to the user? Is he receiving it? If he has problems with it, how is he servicing it? How is the tech actually already ready for him to get it serviced, to get it fixed, to request for a refund online? Is money going back to him ASAP? So I think these are very different challenges. At the core of it, it is all product management, be it hardware, be it software, be it services. But at the same time, each role has its own nitty-gritties, right? And they also can be vastly different in that sense. Uh, okay, the next question I have is from Atul Kumar, and the question is, what? Okay, let me just read it first. What is a generic approach about market sizing? What practical advice would you like to give to aspiring PMs when we are approaching market sizing topics? Yeah, so I think practical advice on market sizing. See, you need to understand the rationale as to why is basically market sizing happening at all, right? What is the reason for it? So, so the whole idea with market sizing is that. You're trying to assess how much traction will the product get, and if it gets traction, then what is the resources that you need to be prepared for. Number two. So with that in mind, I think the advice is basically to kind of have that macroeconomic understanding. You should go through and you should understand what is generally out there in terms of say from a macroeconomic standpoint, what is the kind of what is the company into? What is the business model? Basis the business model, you know that what is the kind of traction that this company gets, how much traffic does it get, and through that you narrow it down and funnel it down to the actual size of the market. So it's a lot of very similar to what I had actually covered earlier as well, right? If there's more detailed questions, then I think we can take it offline as well. Next question I have is from Avinash, and the question is about the hotel ranking feature. Did you have to do the whole feature from scratch, or did you borrow APIs from sites like Booking.com? Yeah, this is. I don't want to get into how this was done because this is again confidential to the company. But in general, again, this kind of depends from PM to PM and from company to company, right? So what works right for your use case. In typical cases, algorithms like these are built in-house in most cases, right? Wherein product managers would have some data and they would actually work with engineers to figure out what is the most optimal way by which, say, a ranking or a search can actually be built. If there are public APIs available, then fair enough. You can always use public APIs. The next question is okay, is from Gokul Krishnan. And the question is there any scenario where a new product or feature was launched which you expected to succeed based on your market research, but it failed or had a limited response from consumers? In such a scenario, how long would a company persist with the concept? Yes, happens quite often. Not only in I think software, it happens in hardware as well. Like the example I gave earlier. For example, you may yourself know, right? There were a lot of phones which were released, for example, which did not really sell well, and the PMs would have had to probably cull down it or decide that it's not selling anymore, and you move on. In software, it happens as well. A lot of examples out there. In fact, for example, I think one of the recent things that was in the news was Ola Cafe, when they probably shut it down because it was a pilot and they tried it out for some time and then decided that what, it's not getting the traction. So generally in such scenarios, it really depends from company to company, depends from the team to team, that you may want to actually invest some time into it and figure out if something can be tweaked, and maybe it'll really work. But in most cases, after even trying out and you feel it's not working, then yeah, then fair enough, the company together takes a call, right? And I think this is not necessarily a decision that is taken by a product manager himself or herself. It is more a decision that is taken in alignment with a lot of other stakeholders. So typically, the PM's job in such cases is to align everyone and to that you take a call either ways. That you do you want to invest more time into it, or do you kind of want to move on and stop the product, basically, right? Uh, okay, the next question I have. Just give me a minute, please. So we have the okay. The next question is. Assuming there are different types of product management roles in various companies, how do you figure out which is the best one suited for yourself? You switched from mobile phones to travel to fashion. What challenges did you face while adapting? Yeah, so I think so. Again, this depends from company to company. Uh, there are so how do you figure out what's the best one suited for yourself? I think I don't know if I have a very good answer to that, to be very honest with you. It is a lot about conviction as well, that you believe in the business model, you believe in the culture. So I think a lot of these questions, a lot of this goes beyond just the role, right? See, PMs in general, even within fashion, FII, or even within travel, the PMs may not necessarily all of them be working on travel. So for example, someone will be working on search, someone will be working on payments, and that may actually remain the same. So a lot of this actually remains the same irrespective of the business that the company is into. So for example, someone who's handling payments at a travel company and who's handling the payments product at a fashion company is actually doing, in a way, something very similar, right? In that sense. So it's not that you're really jumping industries or your role is changing completely. It's not that. At the end of the day, it is also the PM or product management in general remains fairly similar across different kind of companies, right? It doesn't really, it is not a very operational role in that sense. So, for example, see someone who's working in, say, a customer care kind of a role, or a call center is, yeah. If you want to take that person out, you cannot take it out easily and push him into something like logistics or warehousing, because each of these roles requires a specific level of functional expertise. In product management, for example, it's a little different, right? So it's not that I've switched from mobile phones to travel to fashion. At the end of the day, the products that are built are software products, right? So it remains fairly similar in that sense. Um, okay. So the next question I have is from Puneet. Is how does product adoption life cycle? How does a PM face? Does a PM face significant bottlenecks? And the classic problem about first 100 users. Uh, Sure. So I think first 100 users is so in the B2C scenario, right? So I'll tell you what in the so B2C versus B2B is again a little different when it comes to the chasm and first users, right? In B2B, there is a lot of selling that has to happen, and you obviously get your first 100 users through your sales team or through outbound calling or through inside sales and things like that, right? Where you have a list of customers who actually want to whom you've bought into, who've bought into the idea, and they are actually willing to try out your product. In the case of B2C, there is a lot of dog fooding that can happen. So when we say dog fooding, it's basically say products that are built out and you can test it yourself, right? So when you're testing your products yourself, you actually yourself know that what is working out and what is working well and what is not working well. So there, the whole idea of getting users in a B2C scenario becomes through either digital marketing, where you are going and promoting something, and you get the users, and then after that you decide whether say how the funnel is and etc etc. But in the case of B2B, it's slightly different because you have a sales team at your disposal, right? And the sales team actually, it's their responsibility in some way to make sure that there is a ready pipeline of users. And this initial user set is the one that is going to give you a rich feedback in either ways, either B2C or B2B. They will actually be the ones who are giving you the rich feedback because yeah, you're early adopters finally, right? But at the same time, you also want to make sure that you're building a product for the next phase of the discovery of the life cycle as well, and not only for someone who is basically adopting it early because they are a tech geek, so on and so forth. Yeah. Yeah, Brian. Hi. Back to you.